Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. It's me, Gaia Ad. This episode just took so many different turns in a great, great way. I so much enjoyed speaking with Samantha Jewel, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it too. The conversation that we started with, where, kind of going in one direction, ended up tumbling into a very connected conscious. So much so that when I was sitting about the episode, what I wanted to call this episode, I have like a list because we were kind of winding through a whole series of conversations all around the idea of carbon and soil quality and relationship with land and farming. And what started off as something very detailed, like soil and the idea, and the idea of what is carbon sequestration, ended up becoming this super beautiful, expansive conversation about relationship with land and your relationship with food and how it is that true nutritiousness, I don't even know if that's a word. So this is episode 104. The answer is in the food with Samantha Jewel. Enjoy. Welcome to Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. I'm your host, Tigria Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor, certified life coach, and the founder of the Naturally Conscious community. For over a decade, I've been known as a world ambassador for plant advocacy, working closely with plants to share their practical wisdom to help you consciously embody the elements of life that nourish your evolution. In this podcast, I delve into ancient and modern knowledge from biology to spirituality about the wondrous ways of plants. Together, we'll explore how ecosystem thinking helps you overcome limiting beliefs, understand the true nature of relationships, and live an authentic, impactful life. Hi. So we have had several conversations, Samantha, but that's just us. So I want to remember to do the most important thing, which is there's so much to talk about relating to you. Tell the audience who is Samantha Jewel?
Okay. So my background is primarily food. My family created the first restaurant chain in Australia in 1965. So I have been in food literally all my life and raised very alternatively. So even though it's a very, we were doing 50,000 customers a week when I parted ways with the business, very big. It's like before McDonald's, where I got huge recognition here in Melbourne. And and my father came from 6 generations of wheat farming in Goodland, Kansas, lived through the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, his family. So I've got all these unusual connections around food. And in 99, 90, 98, 99, when I was having my first baby, or actually a bit earlier than that, 97 or something, I came across the most extraordinary news of mad cow disease. And I thought, what? Why would anybody feed a cow meat? Like, that's just the craziest thing I've ever heard. And because of that, because we're feeding all these people and I was pregnant, I was doing all this, I was kind of like, God, like, I better look into this. So I spoke to my father at the time and he was like, well, I know that these unusual solutions come up for problems. And because he'd witnessed the industrial age and the children of farmers being sent to university, learning all about agricultural chemicals and it actually causing the droughts and dust bowl as a result of this technology that was wrong for the soil, he was very much like, yeah, go and find out what that is. And so I wrote to all of everything that came into the restaurant. And I rang everybody, I wrote everybody, and I found these things like they didn't know what was in their ingredients. So they'd say sugar was in it. And I'd say, well, I've got this letter from the sugar board, which was one of the ones I wrote to. And it mentions they use a GMO in it. So I discovered about GMOs. And so this kind of snowballed. This went on for years, and they were like, oh, could you send me that document? And gradually over time, the industry started to realize that people were not so happy. And about the same time, I had heard in America, because I was very interested in mental health, and I'd heard that they were feeding children as young as 6 months old Prozac in America. I know they do crazy things in America, but this was like, what? Like a behavioral problem. You couldn't make that up. And so I was like, it's got to be food. And that's kind of why I went down this rabbit hole. I ended up in agriculture because that's what they were doing. Glyphosate had been introduced as well at about the same time, and so it was kind of like this snowballing thing of allergies and problems in children that weren't there before. And obviously now 25 years later, it's not quite commonplace for people to say, oh, glyphosate is so bad. It's still in everywhere, but it's not like I was at that time screaming in the wind, oh, you're a kook. So, that's kind of about where I started. And I have been looking for a unifying point for all those years because, everyone comes up with some reason to say no to everything. and so at about 2006, or 2005 actually, I was listening to I was at one of the international forums for organic agriculture because they were the only ones doing any sort of protocols of monitoring paddock to plate. And somebody said about carbon, and I went, what's carbon? And it was like, this was the unifying thing. So I bought the first soil carbon credit in its draft form that actually got the Australian government recognising it as a trade because I used the company credit card. It helped give it credibility. So as that path began, I thought this is fantastic. So I was so sick of the infighting between all the different organic people, organic, permaculture, biodynamic. I mean, they're all carrying on about, I'm like, you guys all want the same thing. Why are you all arguing about how this is done? So I was really pleased to take this unifying element and see that, whether you believed in climate or not, it was the solution to measuring healthy soil and all the other things that come with it: water penetration, soil health, plant health, nutrient uptake, mycorrhizal facilitation, microbes. I mean, it's across the gamut, biodiversity. No matter what you look at, it all comes down to carbon. So that became I thought, well, this is easy. This is a plant. Anyway, and ever since I've been trying to get farmers paid for it, which has not proven to be easy. People are always coming up for the reason why they don't want to do that.
Wow. Just like you said, that unifying factor. So I guess I have two different questions. One of them is a clarification. Just when you say people pay for it, you mean pay for carbon credits or for how much they're sequestering? Like, can you break that down a little bit further just to make
Yeah,
sure we all
sure. So,
understand?
so obviously everybody knows that climate change is theoretically associated with the emission of carbon into the atmosphere. And
Right.
carbon in its solid form is, CO2, 2 parts oxygen, 1 part of carbon. And the plants take it out of the atmosphere, and that's what they use to create sugars, which they exchange for food and nutrients and microbes. So they take it out of the atmosphere and put it into the ground. They also cycle it back out in the top sort of part. It is an exchange, but the more penetration, the more open the loam of the soil is, the deeper the roots go, the more it gets taken down deep into the ground. So that credit is a measurement of how much carbon has been taken out of the atmosphere above and beyond what's normal. So
Right.
the area is doing, the average is 0.2% carbon, which is nothing, right? Or 0.001 or something crazy, which is really where our soils are at globally. This is what everyone's talking about in terms of soil degradation. If you're doing something like you're managing animals and you're doing all these different things and you're getting increased carbon, which is a proof of your ability to get the plants healthy and actually doing what they're meant to do, you can measure that. And so once you've measured that, that becomes a data stream that can be converted into a numerical number. It's 3.67 times a solid ton of carbon to be how many tons of atmospheric carbon you're taking out of the atmosphere. So if you've got 1 ton of carbon in the ground, you've just taken out 3.67, and you're so anyway, yes, that was my background with it. I had been trying to see what was going on in the food. I came across carbon. Carbon credits are easily measured, and then I'm trying to get them paid for those tons of carbon taken out of the ground into the ground by their activity. So it is a paid amount of money for doing something above and beyond what's normal. So yeah, that's the whole point of it.
And so here's a question for you. So, what in your experience, so of course we can go and look it up, but in your personal experience, what is the difference? Like, what is the relationship between that higher carbon sequestration and the quality of, not just the quality of the soil in terms of like the soil is healthier, but literally, the microbes in the soil, the plants that are in the soil. Like, what is that relationship
Well,
like?
it's a bit like, imagine, I call it the cathedrals in the soil, which was actually, I recently realized, was coined by Walter Jenner many years ago. But it's the cathedrals in the soil. It's about imagining, how could you have people over for dinner and in the pouring rain if you didn't have a house with a roof over your head? Like, you need the space. It creates the space, and from that point, that's where everyone comes to dinner. The microbes come to dinner, the water can come and feed them, the nutrients can be translated, everything can occur. That is because the carbon is there, creating the space and the sponge for the water to be able to be absorbed, which is 4 to 6 times more water can be held with carbon in the soil instead of it
Wow.
running off. So there's lots and lots of stats. If you go and watch that movie I just told you about, which is online, rootsdownunder.org, there is a video in there which actually goes into the exact numbers of gallons per ton of carbon that's increased.
Right. And so for increasing of the carbon in and of itself, what happens, like, again, what is the relationship with, for example, the plants? In other words, what is the farmer doing different that is what's creating that sequestration enhancement?
Basically, it's the plant doing the work, but the plant needs to eat, and it gets its food from fertilizers. The fertilizers are the animals. So the animals move across the land, they poop and they pee, and they basically provide food for the microbes. The microbes, the mycorrhizal fungi, are doing this exchange using the sugars from the plant that it's creating from the CO2. The C is carbonic sugars, and they're exchanging that, and there's this constant exchange, this for that, this for that. So this exchange of sugars and carbon is what allows plants to have nutrients in them, and those plants and those nutrients, which become colloidal nutrients. So you think of a rock and you
Right.
break it down with microbes, they turn that into a liquid form, which goes into the plant. The animal eats the plant, and then we eat the animal. And whether you eat the plant or the animal, the point is that those minerals, which are the main stable nutrients, we talk about vitamins a lot and phenols and all these other sort of things, but the thing that's really essential is the minerals, because the minerals are the building blocks of the DNA in your body. And without them, everything kind of collapses. So it'll get water up it, and it'll become dependent on, the plant will have like a tap root and get water, but you're basically using a straw instead of these fine filamental roots which are absorbing all these micronutrients. So that carbon is a reflection of the whole system working together.
Right. And what do you think is different between, I mean, obviously we understand the benefits to the human in this whole carbon cycle and such. You were just talking about how the plants themselves also benefit when everything is working in this way. What do you think is the changing, what is it that makes these particular farmers different? Like, why is it that these farmers, what is their relationship with their land, with the beings of their land, with, everything that we're talking about, that ends up creating this nutritious cycle all the way through?
Yeah. Look, I would say that there are lots of different ways which farmers come at it. Some come at it because they've gotten sick from the chemicals, they've had a death in the family, and they just have to do something differently. Others do it because they see the birds are not there anymore and they need to create a habitat for them. Everyone comes at it with a different reason, but as they start to connect, for whatever reason they got into it, their heart and their mind starts to open up, and they start to observe the land instead of using their mind about the science. The science has kind of made us go into this silo. And as they start, let's say, letting go of the science and moving more directly into interacting with the land, that's when they start to get this understanding. And, things like these more intuitive things that we're talking about, they'll all they have them. The more they walk on the land, the more they have it. But they have not been allowed to experience that because we've been, what is it, 200-300 years now that we've been trying to move away from that. And so I
Right.
think this is the age of the Aquarius, where we're turning around and going back towards that with the scientific data that we've collected, so that we're marrying those two concepts of understanding what it is that we're listening to and not just guessing.
Right. Are there any farmers that stand out? I'm just so curious. Like, are there any farmers that stand out in your mind that you've had conversations with where you're like,
Oh,
wow, that is not the type of connection that we would have expected in like industrial agriculture?
yeah. So there's a couple of farmers that I work with in Western Australia called Diane and Hegarty, and they've got because they worked with this girl called Jane Slattery, and they worked on developing this intuitive stuff, because they came from a period of time where they worked with the Aboriginals and started to be opening themselves in terms of understanding that there was more. And now they are absolutely developed that muscle, that intuitive muscle, and they test all the time. So the land might say, like, they do use some chemicals. So they may put in a crop of wheat or lentils or barley or something, and the land might say, no, we don't want that in now. And so they'll have to do something else. And they have this yin yang thing. I kind of touched on that part of it, but they've really developed it by becoming more and more confident. And when they don't listen to that, don't listen to the land talking to them, they get bad results. And when they do, they're getting world class results. They've now got Stella McCartney takes the wool from their sheep and sends her executives out to Western Australia to go on the farm and see it. And when I first went there, is back in 2014 or 15, I was doing soil tests on them, not soil, sorry, grain tests, because they were doing wheat. And I was finding things in them that from my scientific background point was going, well, that's not good. But then I later found out that actually it's the ratio that's important, the balance. So I didn't really understand the scientific balance part of it, because there were such minimal, tiny amounts that were different. And wheat and all those things, we pay for them on different metrics. So we might pay on protein, or with a vegetable on weight, which might just be water, or, like, we've got different metrics about what the farmer is paid for. And the payment is the most important thing, because that's what keeps them alive and going. So it's difficult to have a change in that. It's got to financially make sense. So a lot of it's about showing them there's a way of taking the chemicals out, and that saves them money on their bottom line. And they get resilience, and they get, if we have a flood or a fire, they bounce back when everybody else doesn't, or they don't burn, or, many things that there are there anecdotally. And so, yeah, I think the Haggertys are amazing. I've seen and talked to Gabe Brown in Kansas, and he's known for his book, Dirt to Soil. Look, there are some amazing pioneers, really, and I've been on this journey for a long time now, since my first books in 2005, and I've never stopped being fascinated, and I don't farm anything. So,
But before we continue, I just want to take a quick moment to share with you one of our eco-conscious business partners.
If you're on a journey of spiritual growth and personal transformation like I am, then you're going to love what I'm about to share. I want to introduce you to Gaia, a one-of-a-kind streaming platform dedicated to expanding consciousness and exploring the mysteries of our universe. Gaia offers thousands of enlightening videos, from thought-provoking documentaries and deep dive interviews to yoga and meditation classes that nurture your mind, body, and soul. Imagine diving into ancient wisdom with the Dalai Lama, exploring the depth of consciousness with Ram Dass, or healing with the insights of Matthias De Stefano or Joe Dispenza, all from the comfort of your home. Plus, you even find me on Gaia. Yep, that's it. I'm one of Gaia's featured experts. Whether you're seeking to connect with your inner self, understand alternative healing methods, or simply curious about the nature of reality, Gaia has you covered. With Gaia, you'll find community of like-minded individuals who are all seeking to grow, evolve, and make a positive impact on the world. It's more than just a streaming service. It's a gateway to more conscious and connected life. Ready to elevate your journey? Click on the link in the show notes to start your free trial today. Trust me, you won't want to miss the incredible content waiting for you on Gaia to support your evolving green brilliance.
I can understand that. I mean, it is an amazing experience, especially because these farmers are spending all of this time in that land, in that experience with these beings. And of course, they could look at it as just a, physical object to a certain extent, right? Yeah, it grows, but it's, it doesn't have any meaning to it. And then there are other farmers that we know that have, like you said, a more heart centric, a more, a connection with these. We were just talking about in the area that I live a few years ago, this couple moved in. He is originally from this area. He was born in this area, and she is a Korean American, and they met working at a restaurant called Noma, which is one of the like world famous restaurants for fermentation. And that's where they met, and they got married and all these types of things as they were working with Noma. And Noma is, very, very much about reconnection with the ingredients through this fermentation process. So this slower process of connecting in. So they move here to the middle of nowhere where we live to a certain extent. And that's exactly what they want to do. They've built this sort of farm to table, this very small farm to table restaurant. But one of the things that I love is like what they're doing is accentuating that relationship with those farmers, right? They're going to the farmers and asking them, how is it that you're relating to your land? And they're finding all these amazing products of this area that are based on those relationships. And those relationships, whether it's, with the animals on the land or the plants of the land, are, like you said, turning out to be, when you start to do the scientific kind of assessments, it's like, oh, wait a minute, these relationships are directly related to better sequestration, the quality of the food, the nutrient density, all
I
of these
suppose,
different
I suppose the
things.
only thing that I would say though on that is that is what we always hear. And the thing is, if we're going to make a change to the climate and human health and poor people having access to healthy food, it has to not just be the small farmer. It has to be the broadacre
Absolutely.
guy with, like,
I
that
agree.
farm I'm telling you about is 40,000 hectares. So it needs to be those big, big farms with big tractors doing big monoculture that have actually worked out how to work with nature. So by rotating other things through it, multi-species, plants and animals, and doing many different things to get that nutrient cycle through it. Because I always say
Right.
it's a bit like having a beer or a glass of wine. You know it's a neurotoxin, but if you're healthy, it'll do nothing to you. Like,
Right.
you'll just handle it. But if you're not, it'll just about kill you. So
Right.
you've got to look at the land in the same way. It can take a lot, but what are you doing, and can it be replicated on a large scale? Because we do have 8 billion people, and otherwise we'll
Right.
just keep doing factory farming.
Right. And I think that that's a great point. And I think that that's the question of the scale, right? How do we turn this into something that is, the relationship is one to many to a certain extent, when you think about the farmer perspective, like the farmer one to many that are on this land, and the land is huge? Or how do we create a different kind of model that allows us to be fed in different ways? And that is a great question. I mean, yes, you're right. For the large industrial farmer, the one that are doing it, we have to make it work,
Yeah.
because it can't just be something that we only focus on. I do wonder sometimes about, I mean, so when I did my master's, we had a big conversation, because there's an area here called, one of the oldest inhabited cities in the entire world, called Matera, is down in the south of Italy. And one of our professors was an expert, and he was originally from Matera, and he's become an expert on the Matera is still a troglodyte to a certain extent city. Like, in other words, there's still the underground homes inside of the caves, and they have the original caves that cave people lived in, because the city has been inhabited continuously. And one of the conversations and one of the problems that was the downfall of Matera was the agriculture, when it became imbalanced to a certain extent. In other words, the relationship between the people was that there was some stuff that was grown out there. In other words, the people would leave their homes in the morning and go out to farm and stuff like that. And then there was other parts of it that were farmed, quote unquote, farmed at home, right? The local garden that gave me this, this, and this. And that ratio for a long time was very balanced. In other words, these are the things where I need large swaths of land, large amounts of animals, and do the agriculture and have the relationship in that way. And instead, this is the stuff that you should be growing at home, near your home and stuff. And I wonder how much also is that we've lost that relationship. We grow nothing at home and we expect everything to be done on this level. And it's like maybe there are some things, some plants that don't want to grow in that way. And that's why we've had to move into this more artificial way of doing it. So I agree that we definitely need the large scale agriculture for many reasons. But I wonder if there's a different balance that needs to be struck in this whole thing in order to create not just a sequestration on the large farms only, but sequestration all over the place, right?
Yeah.
That our land is fertile everywhere.
There's a couple of things with that. The thing about the plant music and the plant stuff that you and I have been speaking about in terms of reading plants is this is what the Hegarties have done at a very large scale by listening to the plant to the land. The plants have interacted with them in the way that is giving them that crop that they need, and also they are giving back to it in the way. And I think it's the giving back part that is the bit that's missing, because the land can do so much more. Like, we're not actually really understanding the vast, almost infinite potential of the land. And I know that sounds ridiculous because it sounds very finite, the land, but the more you understand the, let's say, the matrix like quality of the planet, the more you understand it'll do its thing with no guidance. But when we add our ability to create into it and kind of make magic within it, it can do so much more. And I think that's kind of the next stage. We're just moving only a little tiny bit towards getting that you can't keep pushing and raping the land, and we've actually got to start working with it. But that next stage is still a bit of a ways off, I think.
Okay, wait, I want your vision of that next stage, because I completely agree. I think this goes back to what some conversations that are finally starting to happen is the whole concept is not to throw the humans off the planet because,
No,
oh, the planet is fine. We co-create, we have co-created this
yeah.
planet for those 200,000 years that we have existed as Homo sapiens. We have been co-creating, and before that, all of the other, humanoid type species that have been coming on. Our problem is that we've stopped the co-creation process at some
Well,
point, and
it's more than that. I think that we've been oblivious, we've been asleep. And so we kind of almost have, I mean, if you look back historically, civilizations have come and gone based on the soil. Like, every civilization has gone because they didn't look after the soil. They just took it for granted. You throw a seed in, it grows, you didn't have to do anything, and then they moved on. So it kind of, we almost need to get to the brink of extinction before we recognize the need to wake up. And it's not that the planet can't do more, it's that we have to do more in terms of our own conscious awakening. So I don't even like using those words because they've been bandied around so much, and people talk about doing ayahuasca, and I go and do ayahuasca. I'm like, well, if you lived in the forest and you had to live on the forest and listen at that acute level of understanding, I think ayahuasca would be a really good idea. But I go to a supermarket and,
exactly.
I don't need to go and do that. And so I have no need for that tool. And in fact, it's a distraction because it's not the way I interact. So I think the concept of what we are doing, you talk about this disconnection from the land. My feeling is that, right now the economics are so vastly unaffordable for a person to even have land. For most people on the planet, they can't even have land, let alone interact with it that way. It's like
Right.
they walk on a concrete path, and they maybe look at it and don't you step over on the boundary even. So, I think it's a first world dream that most of the planet, particularly when you go to countries like Asia with 1.5 billion people or something, and you trying to say you should do anything. It's like,
Right.
no, I think when things become overwhelmingly difficult in the paradigm that we're thinking through, it's a good time to just pause and remember that we as spiritual beings are actually the creators of the planet. We create the matrix that is this universe. And so if we want it to be differently, we start with the universe within ourselves and we get that right. So it's about expanding from yourself into the universe around you and creating it differently. So when you say, how do I see it being this way? I think the climate is the best thing we've ever had happen, because it's like people are going, oh my God, it's so bad. The glaciers are melting, the sea is rising, everything's dying, and they can now start to see it. It's not just someone calling the skies falling in chicken level. They're literally feeling it happening. And it's more than just a little bit, it's really getting bad. And yes, I don't believe in listening to doomsayers, because I know that everything can turn around, even if it seems like it can't. So, my message, if there is one, is that I believe in the infinite power within us all to create the universe around it in whichever way we want to. We just haven't yet woken up to what we're capable of.
Yeah, and like you said, especially our institutions haven't. So where, we start to hear a grumbling, and there are, as you said, some farmers, but then farmers feel, like, going back to the whole land perspective, is like, I know that this is the way, that this is the way forward. And yet at the same time, I also need to survive. I need to be able to support this work. And I
And
think finding that right.
you're not even going to say it out loud, because you live very remotely, and the guy next door is going to snub you at the pub, and the woman won't get into the girls' meetings. And, like, that's survival, being in that community, even if
Right,
you totally
right.
disagree with it. So I feel it's to take a leaf out of people like, well, Steiner did. He didn't even tell people about biodynamics until the very end of his life, because he said people
Right.
weren't ready. And I feel that's kind of the journey. It's like, if people are ready, they'll seek you out, and if they're not, don't push it on them. Just keep working on
Yeah,
yourself.
and it's all about these labels, which is so funny, like how much we're afraid, as you said, of labels. There was a great research study done by Natasha Myers, and she calls herself a planthropologist. She's awesome, and one of the things that she discovered as she was going out, as she was interviewing scientists, is exactly what you said. The younger scientists struggled with trying to put words around, or even use any kind of wording, or even accept that there was things that they felt intuitively,
Yeah.
or could experience, or even be connected to, like, maybe the plant is communicating in the research that I'm doing. The plant is the one helping me make decisions on which way to go, and the intuition is not just mine, but it's a co-creation, a relationship that's happening. Where older scientists that had tenure, that had years of experience, that knew nobody was going to take away everything that they had created, they didn't have a risk of losing it all because somebody misunderstood the way that they spoke, they were much more open to saying, yeah, when I'm sitting there and I'm trying to figure out what direction to take my research, sometimes I'm getting hit with something and I know that's not coming from me. Like, I know that has to be coming from the plants. And I think that that's the same thing as what you were saying with the farmer, right? Like, you're not going to go talk in your community if you think you're going to get snubbed, even if the others believe it and feel it themselves, but the fear that is going to cause me to lose contracts, it's not going to play well into a larger space. Yeah, it's survival. And it's really interesting because I think this is my own experience also living. I live in the Alps, at the foothills of the Alps, and really close to us, there's a few towns that are very traditional in the way that they do their animal husbandry. Here I have pasture lands in front of me where they transition from the Alps through to the plains. And so throughout the year, I get cows and goats and sheep and all kinds of different animals, plus the way that they even just tend to the fields. Now, if you sit down with, like you said, a beer in hand, and you have that conversation with a nice, beautiful glass of Italian wine, after a while, these folks are going to talk to you about their experiences, and you realize they're not using conscious, heart open, they're not using any of those buzzwords, right? But that is exactly what they're experiencing.
Of course.
And they will happily tell you about it in these very reserved terms because they've been doing it for generations,
Of course.
generations upon
Yeah.
generations.
Yeah.
But you then try to take that and sell it, like you said, to a larger industrial system that values statistics and stuff, and they don't have the mechanisms to
This
measure all of that.
So this one,
They're not.
back to carbon, because this is
Yeah.
why I focused on carbon, because it's an emission, and it's something globally we are now putting on our accounting books. If you're doing the right thing by the land with your heart, with your connection, you'll be getting more carbon in that land. And if you're getting paid for that, money talks.
Right.
So then you don't have to talk about how you do it. That's the
Right.
one great thing about it. It doesn't really matter how you got it there if you've been doing it through the actual activity of the plants, as long as you're not going out and getting, I disagree with the concept of going and getting biochar and putting it on. So you're burning plant matter to put it back on the ground. I'm like, okay, well, yes, you can do that, but we've got enough of it to get out of the atmosphere. So it's more about making it accessible. And I
Right.
think what you're doing with your glass of wine, this is making it accessible.
Right, right, right. And I think that's a beautiful way of saying it. And that's, I think for those of us that want to see, the labels that say organic and made in this way and are looking for certain types of buzzwords, it's probably difficult. But like you said, if we're going to make the transition happens using, unfortunately, the language that currently speaks, which is the language of money, the language of certain types of statistics and numbers and stuff of this nature. And I know we don't want to hear that, but if we're going to eventually transition where we go back to a culture where we can talk about these things, we've got to pass through the systems and start to break down those systems from the inside out. And the first thing is to make the farmers soluble. In other words, they need to be able to survive and be able to do the wonderful things that they've been doing. Do you find that there are, let me try to figure out how to say these words, because it's a hard question to ask. I'd love to hear from you. What do you think are the tools that the farmers themselves, and by tools I mean communication tools, or what are the tools that they can use to get what they're doing, those that are doing the right thing, how do they get that out to a larger audience? Like what do you think are the things that they need to learn?
I know it sounds like I know what you're asking me, but I have to say the proof is in the food. And if they're getting good nutrients in it, as we get more ability to actually scientifically read that nutrient density and the resilience and the quality and the durability and all those sort of things and the actual things they produce, I kind of think that's still going to be the main way that they will communicate what they're doing. I mean, you can talk with all the things that we're talking about with the intuitives and stuff, and if someone's open to it, absolutely. But I wouldn't start there. I think you have to start in this crossover with the scientific. And luckily, the Bionutrient Association have been working, Dan Kittredge has been working on this for a good 10 years, and they've now got labs testing stuff for farmers that can show the nutrient density, that can hopefully give them premiums. But even if it doesn't give them premiums, that's where I'm working on the carbon so that the price doesn't have to come up anymore, because people are not going to pay more. They haven't paid more, they're never going to pay more. And they'd be right if they had to pay more and they couldn't get access to food. So
Right.
my feeling is if you can get them paid with the carbon through the carbon market, then it's kind of a no-brainer for farmers to want to do it.
Okay, then I'm going to ask a question that's a little bit different. But so in the world of flower, pardon me for 1 second to just set up. In the world of flowers, for example, I remember when I went to Chelsea Flower Show many years ago with the Music of the Plants. It was the first time the Music of the Plants was ever showcased in Chelsea Flower Show, and I was warned before I went. They're like, as a plant lover, for loving plants as beings, you are going to hate Chelsea Flower Show, and they were absolutely right, in London, because so much of what you see at Chelsea is forced slave labor of plants. In other words, I'm going to feed you all this stuff, fertilizers and artificial stuff in order to make you look beautiful on the side. And then,
The foie gras
and
of plants.
exactly. And then you're going to die right after, because if you watch the last day of Chelsea Flower Show, it is gut wrenching how much these people who purport to love plants do not love plants. They will like literally just rip them, throw them away. Thailand, the exhibit of Thailand, literally flew in 2 planes worth of flowers throughout the course of the week, because in order to have them fresh, knowing that they were bringing in a whole ton in order to just kill them. Like they didn't have any intention to keep any of these flowers alive. So, beauty, unfortunately, as we also know in the case of women, is not always something that is done healthfully. So, what in the relation, like you said, the answer is in the food, and you were talking about nutrient density. What do you think of the real, so obviously, carbon is one of the big ones, but what are the real indicators of health? Not just I have a beautiful apple, but like, no, this apple grew in a way that is healthy for the farmer, healthy for the plant. There's a relationship. And these are the indicators that show me that it's not just round and beautiful, but there's other indicators that show the real relationship and the
So
health.
that's why I'm saying the nutrient density tests that are being
Nutrient.
done. And nutrient density, and there are spectrometers that are coming out, but they need thousands of tests done. So they're not at the point where they're at the handheld level. So I am going to say that it's still a ways off, but nutrient density from a human point of view is about as close as you're going to get. But it's a bit
Right.
like a bit like how beauty is going away from red lipstick to, your age group wants everything natural. I mean, my son, who's 26 now, he doesn't like his girlfriend to wear makeup, and none of his friends do. So
Right.
it's a change of fashion. It's a change of um, what is perceived as beauty. So
Yeah, it's the ugly fruit movement where it's like,
yeah,
it doesn't
but
matter if the
but
fruit
that
is
that will
ugly.
come down to as well, even if it's ugly, it will come down to it, like when they put in their mouth, it tastes amazing. Now, I would
Yeah.
say that isn't happening. Like if I go out and eat an organic apple, it doesn't taste good. I
Right.
can go to a conventional, like let's say top end grocer, like I've got an Italian grocer up here, and everyone goes, "Oh, they're so expensive," because they don't mind what the farmer is doing. They just want the best. And when you put it in your mouth, it's amazing. So,
Right.
a number of organic places that I have frequented and supported because I believe in the movement, and the food's terrible. It's not just
Right.
ugly, it's terrible. And,
Right.
I know because of what I've written in my books, I know that the insects are designed with an opposite alimentary canal to a human, to a mammal, because they're there to eat the stuff that mammals shouldn't be eating. So if it's
Right.
full of bug holes and it's missing nutrients, it hasn't had that relationship. There's a lot of very bad organic farmers out there. So
Right.
it's much harder to grow without chemicals. You've got to really listen to the land. It's a whole other level of intuitive. There's some amazing conventional farmers and amazing organic farmers. There's also
Yeah.
terrible ones in both domains. So names and things are not what it is. We will eventually start to read our ability to feel food, because we are just like cows and every other animal. We have a biofeedback, but we've used our brains to stop that. I mean, I think it's kind of fascinating. We were mentioning before we went on about ayahuasca. I think it's fascinating that there's such a huge proliferation of people doing it. I mean, it's a terrible thing to do that tastes terrible, apparently, and they do all these.
Yes.
I mean, all these terrible things they have to do. I've been around a lot of ayahuasca people because they all think I would do it because I'm so into talking to the plants. And I'm like, no, I don't do anything. I'm sorry. I just talk to them. So it's just it's that I think there is an awakening going on, and people are not yet willing to be brave enough to actually just reach out with themselves. They have to go through a via. They still have to go through something else rather than just
Right.
go directly. So, I mean, that's why I like this plant wave thing, because it's a very unintrusive, but it's still a via to get and even I went,
Right.
like when I connected it to my willow tree and it started to sing to me, I was like, oh, hello.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I do understand, even I.
I love that. And I think that that's so true. That was something I learned when I first moved to Italy and I started to look around. I started to go out to the farmers. Of course, you're taught, go look for organic, but I'm in complete agreement with you. I'm like, just because you're organic doesn't mean you have a relationship with your land either. You can be just as strong industrial
Yeah,
agriculture in the way that we're talking and be technically labeled organic. And here, so I have people who come from other countries who might say, oh, well, is this organic? And I'm like, no, it's local. And I know the farmer and I know the relationship that the farmer has, no matter how big their farm is, but I know what they're doing. And that's more important than the label, because that's what's really going to give us that density of that nutrients. And like you said, you're going to
I'm going to
taste
go.
it.
I'm going to go a step further and tell you that the work that we've been doing, what we've observed is it doesn't actually even matter what the farmer is doing on the farm. It's where is his consciousness at. So the
Yes.
animals and the plants are actually servicing the human. And if the human is in a state of bliss, consciousness, and particularly if they've got a partner and they are happy, the land, every land I've gone on to where the husband and wife are happy, the land has been happy. And that the more they're able to beam that joy of existence into their land, it beams it back. And it will tell them what it needs or what it doesn't. And that need is a bit like the beer we were talking about. We know it's a neurotoxin, but sometimes it's wonderful and other times
Exactly.
it's not. So it's not about the physical reality of the universe. It's about what is bringing you as close to joy as possible. Following your bliss is a very important thing to do.
I think that that's the perfect way of explaining it. I think that that is exactly where we need to move on all levels. And I think that it's not, like you said, it's not about the size. Sure, we want to believe that the small local farmer is doing it better than the other, but that's not it. And it's, again, if we're going to feed the masses that today are trying to go to the supermarket, we need to get all levels of farming to reach exactly that level of what you're talking about, to for them to feel comfortable enough, secure enough, even economically secure enough. I
Which is
was just going to ask you,
where
I was about to, you just sort of preempted the next question I was going to ask, which is, everybody, tell us about the book. Tell us what's in the book. Why is this book? Who is this book for? Tell us everything.
the book is really designed for people who know nothing. Like most people that are in the regenerative agriculture space will know what I'm talking about in here, but I've tried to make it simple. I've tried to make it for the conventional farmer, the governance policymaker, the carbon trader, the layperson who doesn't care about anything. And I have to say, I gave this book to a farmer in the sugar industry, and I had just been doing a whole field day with this machinery that's all heavy, and like the irony of what I'm doing and what the machinery thing that I was attending was about. And he said, oh, I haven't read a book in 30 years. He said, I've got triplets. I'll never read it. And I said, look, I'm told it's a 4-hour read, and I don't want it to be complex. So I'd really love your feedback. So he rang me twice, once to tell me, I can't believe it. I'm halfway through and it's 2 hours and I'm still reading it. And then the next time he rang me to say, I just want to say thank you because I didn't know I could learn any more about the land after a lifetime as a farmer.
I love
So
it.
that was so touching for me. So I have to say, it's for everybody. People think it's for the farmer, but I'm like, yeah, it's for the farmer, but it's also for you. You eat. Everybody is involved in the land and the soil, and it's not this mystical thing. It's complex. There's a lot of elements around it, but it's worth learning about it. It's something we should be learning about in school, really,
Hmm.
because it's
Actually, you just said something beautiful, which is, it's something that is important. We're all like connected to farmers. We all, to a certain extent, should have a level of understanding and of knowledge around this whole aspect of life, because it is fundamental. You can't eat without it. And so therefore the idea that we've passed that on to somebody else and said, well, I don't need to know how it works because, I'm not the farmer. And it's like, but you eat and you live on this planet.
yeah.
Like,
You eat, you're involved. That's all there is to it.
exactly. Show it to us again.
Okay, now I just want to let you know I'm running out of disk space, so the computer's getting slower and slower. This is my book. You can find it as an ebook on Amazon, so you can download it, or as on my website, samjewel.com, which I believe clicks through to the publisher, which is Camden Publishing, and you can order the hard copy. And
And you could also get it directly from your website, right?
well, the website clicks through to the publisher, and they do the printing.
Okay, for the publisher. Perfect.
I don't
Perfect.
do the printing. So, and I might get round to doing the Audible, but I it's so hard to do. I just don't think I can do it. I keep
It's
trying
4 hours. It's 4 hours.
4 hours. No, it's not 4 hours of talking aloud. It's 4 hours of reading.
I know, I understand.
Very
I've
demanding.
voiced over a few books and I've translated a few books, so I totally understand. And actually, this week we have the week that we're recording this, I have the next discussion for the book that we're reading right now as part of the Plant Wisdom Book Club. And so you're right. It's like speaking it out loud and reading are two different things, two
Totally
completely
different.
different things.
Anyway,
So this has been so wonderful. Are there any last words that you want to tell the audience?
no, I just think that it's a journey worth having, and you might be quietly surprised by how fascinated you become once you take the small baby steps towards it.
I love it. I love it so much. Thank you so much for this conversation. I am
Lovely.
very excited to get everyone thinking about this in a completely different way. And so thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. And let's get it out into everybody's hands.
Thank you.
Wow, right? Wasn't that amazing? And it is true. The answer really is in the food. Food is what is the indicator, what is being shared from the plants with us. And I think it's so important for us to look at it that way. You know, honestly, everything always turns out to be about relationship. We're not meant to do any of this alone. We are meant to co-create on the land, with the land, as the land. We're all beings of this. And the plants know this, and they've been pushing us in that direction, right? They thrive in relationship, and we thrive in relationship. It is all about relationship. And so, if you are also looking to make decisions to bring more of this naturally conscious thinking into your life, I'm going to give you 2 ways to do that. And they are related. One is join the naturally conscious community. That is the place where we are having these conversations. It's also the place where you can support this podcast and conversations like this. Every single day, we are having the book club, the writing group, the master classes, the classes, all different ways for you to expand your knowledge and interact and co-create the vision of the future that we want to build together. And then, of course, if you're looking for more personalized support, I'm always here for you. I love working with multi-passionate, conscious, nature friendly people who want to create a whole new paradigm. And so all you have to do is just book a call with me and we can talk about it. So everything you need is in the show notes. There is information about Samantha Jewel. There's information about me. There's information about the Naturally Conscious community. It's all there for you. So if you are ready to take the next step in your future, we are here to support you. And so that's it. That's it for this episode. I am so excited about what is coming in this coming year. Remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. No matter how crazy things are out there is a path forward, and together we'll find it.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. To continue these conversations, join us in the Naturally Conscious community, your premier online ecosystem for plant reawakening and accelerated evolution and co-creation with other kin. Here, you'll find expansive discussions, interactive courses, live events, and supportive group programs like the Plant Wisdom Book Club and the Sprouts Writing and Creativity Group. Connect with like-minded individuals collaborating with plants to integrate these insights into life. Intro and outro music by Steve Shuley and Poinsettia from The Singing Life of Plants. That's it for me, Tigria Gardenia, and my plant collaborators. Until next time, remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. I'm out. Bye.